Last year, China broke the record and surpassed $1 trillion in trade surplus, which is something that no other country has ever done. China is the biggest threat to the United States because China is the only country that can threaten the United States as the status of the dollar as the global reserve currency. All other countries might not like the US dollar, but guess what? They have no other option but to continue using the dollar. And based on the current trajectory where the real GDP of China is growing by 5%, while the real GDP of the United States is growing 1.5 to 2%, it is mathematical that over time, China will overtake the United States as the world's largest economy. So the question remains, what will the United States do about it? Will the United States, for the first time since 1940s, accept the status as the world's second largest economy? That will be the end of the dollar as the global reserve currency. So here is exactly what the United States is doing to turn China into Japan 2.0 so that the China falls into a deflation and never overtakes the United States. BRICS countries recently overtook G7 as the world's largest economies. However, if you look at BRICS nations, you will quickly realize that China represents 70% of the BRICS. So if you slow down China, suddenly BRICS is a paper tiger that is no threat to G7. Even Russia, which is literally the country that founded BRICS, has a GDP of $2 trillion. Compare that to China's $20 trillion GDP. If you compare Russia's economy to the United States, it's a fraction of the US economy. And that's why if you want to continue the dollar to be the global reserve currency, if you want the de-dollarization to stop and the world to continue using the US dollar, you simply have to stop the Chinese growth. Because without China's largest economy, countries around the globe stand no chance to stand against the United States. China recently has been signing deal after deal to start supplying China with oil that is being purchased in local currency, such as the Chinese yuan or the Russian ruble or the Iranian currency. But here's what most people don't get about those deals is that, yes, those deals are bypassing the dollar, but you're still using the dollar to measure those oil to begin with. So if we are trying to weaken the dollar and the Chinese currency is going to become more expensive in relation to the dollar, even though that China is bypassing the dollar, the cost of energy for China is still going to be massively expensive. And that's why dollar has been losing a lot of value against major currencies, at least by 12% over the last 12 months. But China hasn't been simply sitting aside. They're also massively devaluing their currency. But overall, over the last 12 months, the United States dollar lost 5% of value in relation to the Chinese yuan. And here's the biggest problem that China is facing, that it is importing roughly 90% of all of its oil. And without oil, you can't be running those factories, you can't be manufacturing more cheaply than European countries or basically other neighboring countries. And these three countries basically supply most of the oil for China. Since Iran is under international sanctions, China was buying its oil at a fraction of the price. And now, United States might strike Iran and change the regime there, which could turn Iran into an ally of the United States, and China will no longer be able to access the Iranian oil for a fraction of the price. Trump has also replaced the president of Venezuela currently, and China has spent probably $60 to $80 billion trying to revive the Venezuelan oil industry so that it secures its future oil supply. Venezuela does not currently produce much oil because the entire industry has been collapsing since Venezuela has fallen under international sanctions. But with the Chinese technology and investment, it was possible to start extracting much more oil, and that would secure China's future oil supply. But now, with the regime changing in Venezuela, that is not going to happen. Trump has also been trying to pursue Russia to join back the G7 countries. Because if you are going to end that conflict between Ukraine and Russia joins back the G7 countries, Russia will no longer be in a position that it has to sell its oil under market price to China just to ensure that its economy continues to grow. And this is just part of the plan. The second part of the plan is to create a deflation in China so that it turns into Japan 2.0. Now, back in 1970s and 80s, Japan was the fastest growing economy in the world. It was on a trajectory to overtake the United States back in 1990s. That's why the United States wasn't really happy about it. Because if the Japanese growth is faster than the US growth, then it's basically a matter of time before Japan becomes the largest economy in the world. But there was one big problem with the Japanese economy, that it was over-relying on exports for GDP growth. How do you grow your GDP? It's basically consumption, investment, government spending, exports minus imports. So the more you're exporting to the rest of the world, the faster your economy is going to grow. Or you should have a very strong domestic market that grows your GDP. In case of Japan, Japan basically built its entire economy by exporting cheap products to the United States. Since Japan was way more poorer than the United States, Japan could manufacture a lot of these cars, electronics, semiconductors cheaper than the US, and were dumping it into the US markets, which allowed Japan to grow so insanely fast, way faster than the US economy. But the United States obviously did not like that, which is why the US imposed tariffs on Japan. So, United States imposing tariffs on rivals that could threaten the US global dominance isn't something new. The US has already tried to stop Japan with tariffs, but that was not enough. You had to devalue the dollar and appreciate the Japanese yen to make it much more difficult for Japanese companies to compete in the United States. So here's how you do it. Let's say, for example, hypothetically, that the exchange rate between the United States and the Japanese yen is 1-to-1. So $1 is equals to 1 Japanese yen. If we are going to depreciate the dollar by 50%, which means that now 1 Japanese yen is going to equal to $2, if you are going to manufacture this pen back in Japan for 1 single yen and export it to the United States, where the new exchange rate is 1-to-2, which means that even though that this pen is still being sold at 1 Japanese yen, it is going to equal to $2 in the United States. Suddenly, prices of Japanese goods in the US has doubled overnight. When prices rise, obviously the demand for these goods are going to fall, and Americans start buying more affordable products. So they went back to buying more US made products. And that was literally the end of the Japanese economic growth, because the entire economic model was based on the fact that Japan is going to export and sell outside its borders. The best way to grow your GDP is through domestic markets. And that means that you have a wealthy population that is going to consume everything. On one side, you're manufacturing. On the other side, you're consuming. Any kind of spending is going to drive the economy because it is going to drive GDP. So the more spending there is in the economy, the bigger the economy is going to get. It is going to create obviously some inflation, and in some cases a lot of inflation. That's the cost of growing GDP. Any kind of spending at the end of the day is inflationary. This is sustainable because you are producing, you are spending. On the other side, there is a second way to grow your GDP way faster, and that is by exporting your goods to the rest of the market. The problem with this strategy is that what happens when you're no longer allowed to sell in the US market? What happens if you're no longer allowed to sell in other nations that you are dependent on? What happens if you are going to become wealthier, your currency is going to become stronger, and your products are now much more expensive than they have been in the past? What is going to happen now? And that's the problem that Japan has faced. If you look at inflation in Japan, inflation after 1990s barely been growing at all. In fact, prices in Japan are even falling down. So while you're complaining about inflation in the US, people in Japan are complaining about deflation, which means that prices are falling down. And at first glance, it seems like oil is great. I like that. I want prices to go down. Isn't that great? Unfortunately, deflation is way worse than inflation. Because when there is inflation, you're more likely to spend. Because you're thinking, if I'm going to keep my money in my savings account, because of inflation, my money is going to lose most of its value. But over time, so I'm more likely to rush and spend that money, which means that more spending, more GDP growth. And now let's look at the opposite scenario, where prices are falling down. If I know for a fact that house prices next year are going to fall, am I more likely to spend money and buy the house today, or I'm going to wait for the next year? Of course, I'm going to wait for the next year. Next year, am I going to spend and buy that house, or am I going to wait for another year? Of course, I'm going to wait, because with each following year, house prices are falling down. And that's why at the end of the day, deflation is going to limit spending, which is going to slow down the GDP growth. And that's why if you look at the GDP numbers of Japan, you can see that starting from 1990s, GDP isn't growing at all because there hasn't been much inflation. And in some years, there has been deflation where prices have been falling down. And that is the main reason behind the collapse of the Japanese economy. So if you can turn Japan, or China in this case, into Japan 2.0, where people are going to be afraid to spend, where there is going to be deflation, then the economic projection of China are going to flip, which means that they're never going to take over the United States as the world's largest economies. Recently, or in the last couple of years, inflation in China has cooled down. In 2023, inflation was less than 0.5%. In 2022, it was about 0.3%. The same thing happened in 2024, and last year, inflation was literally 0%. So China is literally on the brink of deflation. There is a good chance that China is going to end 2026 with deflation. But wait a second, if there is no inflation in China, how is it possible that China's GDP is still growing? In 2025, China's GDP has grown by more than 5%, the real GDP. And that's the real GDP, which means that GDP minus inflation. Well, the real GDP in the US has grown by about 2% last year. And that's because the Chinese economy is an export-driven economy. China last year had $1.2 trillion in exports. This was the main reason why China had a $5 trillion GDP growth. The United States tried to limit Chinese exports with tariffs, but it seems like it hasn't worked as it was planned because there has been so much chaos around tariffs, and we're not even sure if these tariffs are going to stay in place because the Supreme Court can overrule Trump's decision, and these tariffs are essentially going to be ineffective. But let's assume for a moment that these tariffs are going to stay in place. Over time, they are going to have a serious implication. If you're a Chinese business and you are shipping stuff to the United States, right now, you might absorb some of that cost because you don't want to lose your business in the US. But if you realize that these tariffs are going to become permanent, then you cannot absorb so much loss. So you're most likely going to abandon your business in the US. And since China exports and sells in the US $500 billion annually, losing $500 billion is literally at least a third of the entire Chinese exports, which is certainly going to slow down the GDP growth. Secondly, as I have told you earlier, that the United States is weakening the dollar, and a weaker dollar is going to make American exports much more affordable, while it's going to make internationally the Chinese exports much more expensive. Even though that China is bypassing the dollar in its transactions with its trading partners, at the end of the day, most of these commodities are being measured in the US dollar. So let's say that China is trading with Singapore. Singapore is going to value every single piece of commodity that it's going to buy from China in US dollars. So if you are weakening the dollar, suddenly in relation to the dollar, the Chinese yuan is going to become much more expensive, which is going to make Chinese goods much more expensive. But here is the difference between Japan and China. What destroyed the Japanese economy was the domino effect. The moment that investors realized that it's over, the Japanese economy is going to collapse, prices are falling down, there is a deflation that is happening in the market, guess what investors did? They instantly sold their assets in Japan, moved that money outside Japan, and invested that money elsewhere, primarily in the United States. So it created this snowball effect. But unlike Japan, China has capital controls in place, which means that There is a limit on how much money you can get out of China. There is a limit on how much you can sell. There is a limit on how money literally moves across China. And because we live in this technologically advanced society, there is literally no way for you to sell more than you're allowed, and you can't possibly take that money out of the economy. And this is, by the way, one of the major reasons why the Chinese real estate crush hasn't actually happened. The Chinese housing market is crushing since at least 2020, but we haven't seen that because it is a manageable crush. The Chinese party does not allow that crush to turn into a domino effect. But why didn't Japan put capital controls in places? Why didn't Japan control the outflow of cash out of Japan? And that's because when you put capital controls, it makes your country uninvestable. Imagine you're sitting on $1 billion and you're investing that money, and you have two countries to invest. In one country, you can invest your money, you can make a profit, and then you can withdraw your money once you have made your profit. In the second example, there are limits, there are restrictions on how money is being moved. So even if you make a profit, you're not allowed to sell all of your investments and get that money out of that country. Will you invest in that country? Probably not, because you want to be confident that if I'm making this investment and I made a profit, I want to exit my position, get my money out of that country. And that's why China is so uninvestable to so many investors. So here is the plan in summary. Increase energy prices for China, create a deflationary environment in China, and slow down Chinese exports. All of this should slow down the Chinese GDP growth. It might not slow it down to 0%, but if you can slow down China's GDP growth to 1.5% to 2%, while the US GDP grows by 2 to 2.5%, then the new trend is going to be that nobody will overtake the United States as the world's largest economy. Will China fall into a deflation by the end of 2026? We will have to wait and see. But if you want to learn how to take advantage out of these events and be an investor, then check out the first link in the description of this video. I put together a free investing program that will teach you step by step on how to start investing and profit out of the market. So if you want to access it completely for free, check out the first link in the description of this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.